Welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, your go-to podcast for expert advice, market insights, and real-life stories to help you buy your first home with confidence.
Hello and welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, the podcast that is with you every step of the way during your property journey. I'm Emilie, Lauer, journalist here at Momentum Media, and today I am joined by my co-host and colleague, Liam Garman. Hey, Liam.
Hey, Emily. How are you?
Good. And today we are going to do a market analysis because, look, what we've been doing on this pod is giving, a lot of insight into, how to buy your first property, what to look for. But we haven't really yet done a proper market analysis. Now, the first home guarantee scheme has launched. It launched on the 1st of October, which means that there is a wave of first home buyers that are going to enter the market. But, what does the market look like? What's happening at the moment? What to look for? Well, that's what we are here for. Liam, do you want to give us a little bit of an intro on what's been happening since the 1st of October, since the launch of that first property buyer scheme?
Yeah, so look, speaking to a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues in the broking profession, the mortgage broking industry, and a lot of my colleagues in the buyer's agency space, there is a quite a substantial uptick in activity, and this is for two reasons. The first reason is that yes, a lot of first home buyers are looking to come on the market. There is that FOMO aspect where they forecast that given that prices are expected to grow more off the back of this policy, that they should jump in sooner. But it's also driven, on the other hand, that a lot of people already in the market, a lot of investors or just even regular homeowners are now looking down the barrel and saying, well, this is going to cause an increase in property prices. So therefore, I should move now before the whole wave comes through. It's kind of what we're seeing, though I do think it is going to cause some suboptimal emotional buying.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that buying a property is such a hard thing. It is taxing. It is emotional. It is challenging. You have things like you will fall in love with properties on your journey that simply you won't have, and you will have to compromise. You will have to surpass something at auction and let it go through because it is just slightly out of your budget. You just have to accept that. What you don't want to do, and this isn't financial advice, obviously, but my observations with a lot of first home buyers is don't get sucked into something if it's not right for you, because the way in which the market is moving, not all markets going to move uniformly. If you're in an area which is likely to be of acute interest to first property buyers, there is a chance you will pay overs for your property. Likewise, and I know a lot of our listeners might not necessarily agree with this. A lot of our listeners, I would hazard a guess, would be from markets like Melbourne, Brisbane, Sydney, which are quite expensive areas to buy. And what I'm about to say might be a bit shocking, but there are a lot of cheap areas of Australia to buy. That is just an actual absolute fact. And these aren't areas necessarily where you'd want to live, by the way. But if you did look right across Brisbane, for example, if you looked right across Melbourne, for example, in Geelong, you can get some fantastic houses for $500,000. They do exist.
And I think that's a good reminder that it's not because the 5% deposit scheme is on that you have to go down that route. You can become a first-time property owner by doing some rentvesting and basically becoming a landlord. You still own a property.
For sure. The only benefit of the first home buyer scheme, the hysteria comes from the fact that everyone sees billions of dollars coming into the market, which is an absolute fact. It is an absolute fact that this scheme has meant that there will be billions of dollars moving into property that wasn't here before October 1. Oh, that was, heating up before October 1 as people try and beat the sprint. What it is at the end of the day is a 5% deposit just means you're not paying lender's mortgage insurance. And I'm a massive defender of lender's mortgage insurance. Lender's mortgage insurance is, it's a few $1,000s. It can be up to $20,000 if, say, you're right at the higher end of that. If you're in Sydney and you're borrowing up to 1.4 mil, your lender's mortgage insurance will be quite high. if you're looking at that lower quartile area, you know, if you are looking at in places like Geelong, for example, if you're in Victoria, or like Caboolture, if you're in Brisbane, or if you look at areas like, you know, around Campbelltown in Sydney, where you can still get houses in the 800s, if you're looking around that, your lender's mortgage insurance actually would not have been huge. It would not have been, it'd be several $1,000s. To be very frank with you, if you weren't able to pay several $1,000s for lender's mortgage insurance, you should not be buying a house. And I'll tell you that right now. Do not buy a house if you're going to count pennies over several $1,000s. Yes, is several $1,000s a lot? Hell yeah. And a lot of people might say this is heartless. But over the course, if you have a $700,000 mortgage over the course of 30 years, you're going to pay back probably 1.4 mil. There's going to be 700 grand of interest there. And this is assuming you put down a 20% deposit. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. If you're going to potentially have higher interest rates as a result of borrowing up to 95%, and all you've done is save yourself a few $1,000s on lender's mortgage insurance, realistically, this policy should not be as impactful as it is. But it is. So my recommendation is go back to the basics, do your research. You might have to go into areas where they're not your favorites. You might have to settle, you might have to compromise, but don't get involved in this emotional rush because you see all your friends do it, you see your cousin do it. Don't get involved in this emotional rush because you see your parents you see on the weekend, they're telling you got to do it, stop renting. The worst property advice that I've ever got are from family members. I cannot stress that enough. The worst property advice I have ever received is from family members. Do not listen to them. Go back to the basics. Listen to podcasts like this. Emilie, I know you've been doing this podcast for months and you've had really smart people on talking about, you know, how to negotiate, how to find a good area, you know, Look at the data and don't get sucked in because your friends are doing it. You have a few months to breathe and think about this, research your area. I did a fantastic podcast. I'm the host of the Smart Property Investment Show, and I did a fantastic podcast with a buyer's agent from Melbourne. And, you know, one of her philosophies, Dawn Fooey, from Future Proof Property, you know, her advice is look for the bridesmaid suburbs. And I thought it was an awesome way of looking at it. Yeah, and you can everyone listening to this can already work out what it is. So what's a bridesmaid suburb? You know, in Sydney. Now, if we look 20, 30 years ago, a bridesmaid suburb might have been Coogee to Bondi, right?
Yeah.
A bridesmaid suburb. Now, obviously, Coogee is very ooh la la now.
It's very bright now.
Very bright now. And now maybe the bridesmaid suburb to Coogee is Maroubra. And then Matraville is going to be the bridesmaid suburb to Maroubra. And these are just examples. And kind of as you go further down the coast, you can still get pretty affordable places there, right? Look at the bridesmaid suburb. You think Dulwich Hill is very ooh la la, then look at Summerhill. You know, I can't speak to other, you know, Bridgeman Downs, look at Aspley in Brisbane. You know, there are these bridesmaid suburbs out there where you are, you know, a few kilometers outside of a really hot area. And what you'll start seeing is instead of saying, you know, oh, I'm 30, I'm getting my first place, I really want to be in Newtown because Newtown is so hot and everyone there's so cool and I want to seem really trendy. No, look at Stanmore. The Inner West is probably not the best example for this because everyone's already been priced out.
Ooh la la.
But if you look around Australia and there's a really hot suburb that everyone's really cool and you want to be seen there, if you move 5 kilometers out, people will be priced out of those suburbs and they will come to your suburb. That's just an example of just thinking strategically about this because there are risks associated with the first home buyer's guarantee. And those risks are really self-evident. I know the Barefoot Investor copped a lot of heat over this last week or the week before, warning about negative equity. And this is something that on my show, on the Smart Property Investment Show, that I've been warning so many people about is the negative equity aspect because the maths really speaks for itself. So you put down 5% deposit means you have a 95% mortgage. When you first start paying back a mortgage, and a lot of our listeners might not really know this, or a lot of them might have heard about it, but a really big portion of your first 15 years of interest repayments are only interest.
Yeah, like 3/4, basically.
Yeah.
If you do like principal and interest, you're about 3/4 of interest.
Yeah.
And like 1/4 out of
I think when I
principal.
first, I think when my first place came through and my monthly repayments were like 4,100, I think, monthly. And I think the interest grew by 3,200. So every month I only paid down $800. So these are approximate. It was in the low 3,000s that interest accrued a month, and I was paying back in the low 4,000s.
Yeah.
So yeah, about just
About-
over 75%, maybe 80% of it. Yeah, 3/4, like you said, is in interest. So after a year, now I played the game. I played the game with pummeling everything in the offset.
Yeah.
I played the game of weekly repayments instead of monthly. We did all of that. But realistically, after the first year, you only paid back like 10K of it. So what happens when you've got a 95% mortgage and then after a year you have a partner and, you want to have a kid, or you've split it 50-50 and your partner loses their job and you've got no savings left? And you've only, after a year, paid back 8, 9, 10K. And now your seller's fees, your real estate agent fees, will be about 2.5%. So that's a bare minimum. So that will be, if you're selling $1 million place, it's going to be an extra 20, 25K that you lose, that you have to pay someone to sell your place. You'll have to pay marketing costs for your home outside of that. So you might end up paying up to 30K. So... But you only paid it down like 10K plus the 5%. What Scott Pape said with Barefoot Investor, what he said about people being in negative equity is a real risk. It is a huge risk that I think his words were like, all it takes is a bad week and you're out of it, especially when you look at the rate of savings for young Australians. Yeah. There are huge risks here. So on the flip side, I didn't pay lender's mortgage insurance. I shopped around when I bought my first place. I shopped around, and it's actually not uncommon for banks and for lenders to actually have specials. You get a target of 50% off or something. I got a special with the Bank of Melbourne where I got lender's mortgage insurance for $1.
Which is pretty good.
Which is
nothing.
The equivalent would have been like 10K or something.
Yeah.
So, which is really fantastic. These things exist, but in terms of that emotional side, getting on the property ladder for the sake of getting on the property ladder, make sure that your financials are in place, because he's 100% right. And a lot of young Australians went out for blood against the Barefoot Investor, saying that, how dare you, rent money's dead money. Not necessarily. Not when you lose your job in a month and then suddenly you have to sell and then you're now down 30, 40K.
Yeah.
Which is a real risk. Rant over, but it is something that a lot of first property buyers need to be acutely aware of.
Yeah, which reminds, back to do your due diligence, look at the data and make a smart investment or buy smart. So going back to the suburbs and the bridesmaid suburbs, love that. Since the 1st of October, because the property price income caps has raised up. So now first home buyers can access 63.1% of property nationwide, up from 33% before.
But don't.
No, but be smart. Be smart. Be smart. Look at where and look, I've been repeating, that's my mantra, I think. Keep a buffer.
Yeah.
Keep a buffer. Don't spend all your money on the deposit and don't max it out. Keep a buffer because you never know what's going to happen. Hot water tank, back on it.
Yeah.
Or, you need to do a reno, or you've got a leak, or a strata special levy that you didn't see coming up.
100%. That's you had the hot water tank example. I had with my we've spoken about it before, making sure that there's enough money in the strata hitting
100%.
Because our strata repayments were, for our place, next to nothing. It was like $900 a quarter. It's like, we're cheering. And we were looking at places where it was like $3,000 a quarter. Why would you be so stupid paying that? But all it took was one major works that wiped it out. And then we were all left holding the bag for $12K. and you have to pay it. Okay, that's not necessarily true. You don't have to pay it. Typically, what a good strata manager would do, and this is for a lot of our people out there that are looking to buy units, make sure with your body corporate you have a good strata manager, because what a good strata manager would do is they should, look to offer you some kind of finance option, which is, Emilie Lauer Strata Corporation has got a relationship with this lender. We can offer you 8, 9, 10% interest rates, and we will finance it for you, and then you repay it over years. But not every strata manager is equal. Our strata manager, absolutely appalling. So this went on for about a year. And as it turns out, like, our strata manager was getting like piles and piles and piles of legal threats. And the only reason we found out, and they never passed any of this on, and the only reason we found out was one of the CEO of the person that carried out the works actually ended up contacting us, someone in our body corporate individually, bypassed the strata manager. And he'd had like a year of references, and basically said, what we're going to do is we're going to charge you all these extra fees. Like, we've spent hours and hours and hours of legal consultation trying to get through to your strata people. None of them have come through. We're going to charge you this interest, that interest, that interest, that interest. And then basically we're all getting threats from lawyers. This is the flip side, that there are going to be times where, mate, your life is going to be so much better off if you do have that buffer.
Yeah.
It is actually very much a non-negotiable.
Oh, 100%. And look, the buffer can always sit on your offset account and reduce the interest
Without a doubt.
until you need it. Like,
Yeah,
honestly, like, having a buffer is, I think, one of the key, like, best financial decision you need to have when you're buying that first property.
Well, your hot water broke within like the first 2 weeks of moving.
Not even, like,
first
a week.
Yeah.
On my birthday.
It was. That's right.
It was on my birthday.
Yeah,
I got like cold hot water on my birthday. I had like to do the buckets with the hot boiling water and like try to maximize, and a cup.
Yeah.
I felt rustic.
Yeah, that is very rustic. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you know what? You call them. It's on the weekend. The plumber asks you like an extra $350 to just put like a temporary one, when the old stuff already like costed about $2,000. Hey, $350 is $350. When you've got a mortgage, $350 is $350.
Especially when you buy your first place and you guys, you and Chris rented together, but a lot of people might be moving into their first place for the first time. Furniture.
Oh,
You're
my
going to be
God.
dropping thousands of dollars on furniture. $350 is really important.
Marketplace is your best friend.
Our Facebook Marketplace.
Oh,
I've got a corker. I've got a corker of one. This guy, I was selling a couch a few years ago on Facebook Marketplace, and this lady contacted me on behalf of her brother, because her brother was going through a divorce and he needed furniture for his new house. And I'm like, yeah, sweet, come up. And we were on a wait list for a sofa, and then suddenly we were on a wait list, which was meant to take a few months. And then like after 48 hours, they were like, oh yeah, it's been delivered in 48 hours. And I'm like, oh crap, now we've really got to get rid of our sofa right now. So we put it up for next to nothing. It was fantastic, this awesome piece, but it just didn't fit in our apartment. And this guy came up, and he was quite a weedy nerd. Not to belittle him, but he was a very, he's not a guy that's going to be able to carry a sofa, right? So I helped carry him down, carry the sofa with him downstairs, load it into his truck. He and his sister, me and his sister ended up doing most of it, as he, stood to the side, like turn left, turn right. Mate, I can work that out myself, you idiot. But anyway, then
pivots.
While I'm putting it into the van, he goes upstairs to my unit and then starts negotiating with my wife to try and push the price down. And then I came up as he's leaving. I'm like, oh, it's a bit weird that he came up here. And then I saw this look of fury in my wife's face. She's like, oh, he just tried to cut us down, said this. And I went to walk outside because I was about to say to him, I'm like, no, it's all right. You can bring the couch back up. But then my wife grabbed me by the shoulder. She's like, do not do that. Just let them go. But anyway, Facebook Marketplace, I've had mixed reactions.
My TV unit is from Facebook Marketplace.
Yeah.
It's like proper wood, like heavy wood.
Proper stuff.
Like proper stuff that I got for like less than $100. It's the most beautiful TV unit I have.
Yeah, that is good.
Like, Chris wants to like get rid of it because we want to build like a built-in wardrobe-ish in the living space to put like shoes and stuff like this. I don't want to get rid of it.
Yeah, don't.
My table is from Facebook Marketplace. Lovely table.
Yeah.
We drove like 2 hours to pick it up. I have to say.
That's quite an adventure.
You'll see it. I'll share a picture with the listeners. It's beautiful.
Yeah, put it in the show notes.
In the show notes. Yeah. Look, going back onto our business. So, what's been happening over the last month? So, the scheme came in October 1st, but the market frenzy started before because everybody wanted to get in beforehand. So prices have actually increased in September already, which is the strongest monthly growth since October 2023.
Wow.
So they rose by 0.8% in September. And that's capital cities, yeah? So, of course, like some capital cities have done better than others, but on average, everything is doing well. Sydney 0.8, Melbourne 0.5% increase, Brisbane 1.2, Adelaide 0.9, Perth is the second highest with 1.6%, Darwin the first one with 1.7%, Canberra 0.7%, and Hobart's lucky last with 0.1%. So all of the markets are growing at a different pace, which again goes back to do your research. Like, what do you want to do with your property? Do you want to live in that property or do you want to become a property investor? What's your goal? Do you want to have rental income? Do you want to have capital gain? Or do you just want to stop paying rent and live in that property? Then with all of these goals, then start looking for the information and the data. So we had Nick from Smash Property that Nick came Voigt. Like about 2 or 3 episodes ago that gave us all the data to look for. So if you haven't heard that episode, definitely go back to it and look at all of those market pointers.
Yeah, Nick Voigt's cool. He's a good brain when it comes to this. One thing that I would say, so with some of these stats is, I'll pick out a few outliers to start off with. I think Sydney, Adelaide. I think they're just below 1%. They're kind of standard. That Sydney growth probably
it's pretty good,
right.
Still.
It's higher than what you'd expect, but it's and that's probably off the back of the first home buyers. But Perth, big outlier. Now at 1.6% growth. There's a lot of chatter in the property investing community, is Perth over because you've had 3 years of 20% growth year on year. Like there is finite growth. And one thing that I would say to a lot of our listeners is you will see a lot of growth in a lot of areas stagnate. There is absolutely a ceiling to this growth. A perfect example is Sydney, that, if you reasonably look at comparables for a lot of units today versus a year and a half ago, you're not going to see a substantial change. A lot of that change is driven by, it is sucked up by, say, houses on the metro line, which probably have gone up 15%. And that's where you've seen a lot of the growth. A lot of the growth in the unit areas will be, in that higher end unit market, as a lot of people realize that, I will not be living in a house. I will go for a more luxury, pristine unit. You're actually seeing a lot of, high-end grade A type units coming on, which are costing a lot of money. For your regular stuff, it's not necessarily, it has kind of plateaued. That might be an opportunity for growth in the future, obviously, though we can't speculate. Perth is a great example of exactly that, which is if you're from Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, you do have a lot of good amenities in Perth that you don't necessarily have access to in the Eastern Seaboard. That being one, an extremely drivable city where you have amazing beaches 20 minutes outside of the CBD, still valued in the 800-900s. The third thing being really high disposable income, which is stuff that I'm sure Nick spoke through. So there are still pockets of growth. Now, I'm not saying Perth. I don't have any horse in the game in Perth, but when you look at suburbs like that and you look at the amenities, you look at what they offer, you look at some of those underlying financial data that Nick would have pointed out last week of the of the average wage, the days on market, the supply, and you look at the underlying data, you will see that right across Australia, there are still some really good purchases. Same as in inner city Melbourne, there's some really good buys there where, they will likely go up because that financial data is stacking up and people want to live there. In comparison, and I would say this in comparison to, and this is the same, I'll put this in the same boat as don't invest financially, is, you got to take a lot of the green fields off the plan building stuff with a huge grain of salt. Apartments, you and I have spoken about this on previous episodes, Emily. Apartments, don't take a grain of salt. Take 5 fistfuls of salt. Take buckets of salt.
Check your strata, please.
Check your strata. And even then, don't even believe it, to be honest. And I'm going to be very frank with you. Don't even believe it. I know we've spoken about this in the past, but most research has shown that if you buy in a new apartment building, you've probably got a 50-60% chance of there being major defects.
Oh, don't buy new.
I know. That's what I'm saying.
Do not buy new.
That's what I'm saying.
My rules of thumb, nothing after 2015.
Yeah. So then on the flip side, what a lot of people say is, again, this isn't financial advice, but what a lot of people try and sell it as you get the depreciation benefits if you buy new. Check with your accountant, because most of the depreciation benefits you get, you end up having to pay back upon sale.
Also, depreciation also works for renovation. So if you renovate, then you can claim that depreciation.
Yes, you can. You can. This is, I think, in terms of the new build aspect, one of the biggest selling points of the new build. One of the biggest selling points of the new build is that you get to do that. Upon sale, you have to give the money back. So realistically, you might benefit yourself in the short term, but realistically, you're not going to be better off long term. What you do end up, the risk is that in a lot of these new off the plan building areas, there is a huge time lag in terms of government infrastructure. So when you look at Western Sydney, and you've just got areas where you read it on the Daily Telegraph every day, where there's these new developments where you're an hour from the closest school. So ask yourself, fantastic, I've got this really nice modern looking building. Mind you, it's probably 30 centimeters away from your neighbor. It looks like crap. But yeah, it's a nice modern building. I could live here.
Yeah.
I can see a future here. Factor in the fact that you're going to be driving your kids an hour to school. Factor in there is no bus, no train. You're going to be sitting in traffic. One thing I would say is just be careful. Go back to the basics. Look at the amenities. Look at the finance.
And that's also how you get growth in your property. So, it's all about supply, demands, amenities, what's nearby, and what's the potential you're seeing there.
Yeah.
So if you take something that is an hour away from the nearest school, you know that it's not going to grow as much in terms of capital gain.
Hell no.
And also, you're going to have so much more difficulty selling it back afterwards.
That's exactly right.
So if you take something that is maybe a little bit more expensive from the get-go, that is not going to grow as much because it's closer to the city, but over the long term, that's where you're going to get... I don't want to say lucky because it's all about strategic, but that's where you're going to get more for your bucks. It's all about holding the property also. So do not buy if it's to sell within 2 years. There's kind of no point. So you got to have a long-term vision of that property game in a way.
100%. You touched on something which was really good. Buying to selling 2 years. One thing that I think a lot of young Australians have been hard done by on is the notion of just get your foot on the ladder. Just get your foot on the ladder. And I think this has set back young Australians so far because stamp duty is calculated relative to house price, right?
Yeah.
So now the fact that your entry-level house price is high, there's a huge transaction cost which, our parents' generation, baby boomers, Gen Xers actually never had. There is a huge transaction cost that they never had, which just artificially inflates the price. So when you're looking at house prices in the mills to 1.5 to 2, yes, necessarily you're paying 50, 60, 70, 80K in stamp duty, which is a lot of money.
It is a lot
So
of
when
money.
you look to say well, I'm going to buy this as my starter house and then, I'll sell it in 4 or 5 years, you've got to factor in the stamp duty of your next purchase. You've got to factor in your 2.5% selling costs. You have to factor in the marketing of your selling costs. You have to factor in your conveyancing. These will sum to a lot of money. So, and that's a fantastic point, Emily. You're probably not going to make enough capital gains in 2 years to cover that cost.
No.
So keep that in the back of your mind.
So yeah, it's all about like buying strategically and knowing what's good for you, not only now, but what's your goal in a couple of years. Now, look, we talk about houses. Look, houses is a little bit of a crowded and more expensive market. Let's be kind of realistic. Like most of the first property buyers will buy units.
Yep.
So apartment sales have increased dramatically since January to August. End of August 2025, by 42%. And that's, like linked to affordability, lifestyles, like government incentives, with Sydney having 51% of transaction being apartments. Similarly, Melbourne, 37%, Brisbane, 42% of apartment sales, Canberra, Darwin, 40%, and 36% respectively. So apartments are growing. It's, yes, for affordability, lifestyle, because you're able to stay closer to the city. Because
I'm an apartment dude.
Well, like, did you choose an apartment or did you wanted a house and had to buy an apartment by default?
The latter, but the latter, but also the areas that I would now live in, your houses would be like 5-6 million.
Exactly.
So, it's kind of a moot point because, it's a moot point because, it'd be area first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So apartments growing. So keep in mind that there's extra cost when it comes to apartments.
Yeah, for sure.
So there's strata cost that you gotta factor every 3 months. So make sure that when you're doing your visits, your research, that you factor those costs into it. Also, do not forget they've got GST. And they're not always advertised with the GST.
No, it sounds like you're speaking from personal
I
experience.
am speaking from personal experience. We got it. So we got to look, that was our requirement. Like, we didn't want to go for a huge strata cost every 3 months simply because we know that strata increases. Yeah. Doesn't always increases each year, but it can increase. And if it's already quite high, then the next increase, you're going to really feel it.
But you
it's
can
gonna be a
vote
burner.
through with your body corporate to reduce it.
You can, but it's...
But it'll be hard depending on how big your apartment building is. Our apartment building's got 6 units, so we've got a WhatsApp group with all the owners.
Yeah,
and we talk,
but
and then we just. Well, actually, there's not even all the owners. There's just enough owners to get the votes.
To get the
through.
votes on, yeah. You cheeky, yeah.
Well, it wasn't, I didn't set it up. It's just how
but like for example, when we're visiting things in Zetland, big apartment complex, and then you've got like a 3K strata. Because there is a special levy, but they're like, oh, we don't know when the special levy is going to reduce. So you don't know for how long you're going in that.
Mate, that could be there for years.
Exactly. So factor this within your purchase and factor a potential increase. We're going back to the buffer. Always having that buffer. Any last tips for our first-time buyers?
Oh my gosh, I think I've been full of tips today.
Now that the market is moving. Let's little recap. Market is moving. Property prices are increasing. What used to be $750 like last month is now about $800.
Okay, one thing I will end off with, and I know it's something that you've spoken about before. Actually, we've spoken about. This is the first property buyer show, not the first PPOR, not the first owner-occupier show.
You can go as a rentvester.
You can go as a rentvester. I think, and I get it, because a lot of emotionally, you feel unfulfilled unless you're paying for your own place. Like I totally get it. I dipped my toe into the rentvesting stuff and then completely backed out of it. And it wasn't the path that I chose. But man, it's a yield game. It's a yield game. So that was an oversimplification. When you're adding up the benefits of rentvesting, a very simple calculation one could rely on is yields. So if you're living your best life, you're in Brunswick, you're in Fitzroy, you're an inner city Melbourne kind of guy, probably, the yield, and you're renting an apartment, the yield of that is probably like 2.5%, maybe 3% at the highest end of it. The yield being the relative rent that asset generates to the price of the asset. compare that to areas in, regional areas or outer metro areas where there's very low supply, which Nick would have spoken about. There are a lot of areas out there where you're getting 5% yield. So you'd almost do the maths and, not financial advice, get out the calculator, speak to a broker, speak to an accountant, surround yourself with experts, because there are probably ways that you can live the lifestyle that you want and also be a homeowner.
Yeah.
It can be done. You don't have to go out to the sticks. You don't have to go out to an area where you don't have any friends or family. And I'm a big supporter in living near family, which is why I'm a big supporter of rentvesting as well, because, you need to surround yourself with your community, with your tribe. And if you don't have that opportunity, well, then rentvesting might be a chance for you. So speak to your experts, and I'm not here to sell anyone, just call up a broker. Heaps of good ones out there.
And look, at the end of the day, that's the first step anyway.
Yeah.
Look at what your finances can get you, because there's no point of looking at houses at 1.2 if you can only afford 900.
Yeah.
Like, that's the first step. What's your current situation, what your current finances can get you.
Also,
and start
on
from
that,
there.
One thing that I will say is don't freak yourself out. There's going to be a lot of people listening to this podcast and more broadly that you're welcome to the world of underquoting now.
Oh, God.
You're in the world of underquoting, and don't freak out, because there's going to be a lot of people that you're going to go to realestate.com.au or domain, you're going to punch in a max of 800, 900, and that's going to be your max. You're going to go to a place which is down for 910. You're going to speak to the agent and they're going to come back, oh, we just had an offer for 1.2. It is going to happen. Do not take that as an indicator that in the last 7 days that the market's got up 30, 40%. Do not take that as an indicator. When I did that, when I first went on my journey, that's literally what I did. I typed in a max of 900 and I went to a place in, oh my gosh, it was crap. It was in Crow's Nest. It was on the Pacific Highway. And I spoke to the agent. She's like, yeah, we've got an offer for 1.2. I'm like, but literally online, you said 900. Like literally. And she's like, oh, well, the market's really hot right now. Don't let that get in your head. And don't start using that as a justification to make wild decisions, because with or without the first home buyer's grant, okay, it might have gone for 1.15. Now it's gone up to 1.2, but don't use that as a wild justification of markets going up 30% overnight, because they're not.
So look, we got the same. We had two places. Like our max was 1 million and they both went for like nearly 1.4.
Yeah,
which is mad. So basically my thumb of rule, which I developed, is like it's gonna go up by 10%. So if it's like a 900 property, it's easily gonna go up like 950, 990.
Yeah.
If it's 800, it's gonna go like closer to 9. So if you want to pay only 800, target like a 700, 750 property.
Yep.
That's where you're gonna be able to like grab something
for sure,
for your income and for your wallet.
Yeah.
If you target your max price, it's going to go up because there's demand, there's competition.
You also have the benefit of being a property journalist in your day job. So, you were reading and writing about underquoting every day.
Yes.
You were reading and writing about underquoting every day. So you were primed to expect it almost, but it's still shocking.
It's shocking.
Even though you read and write about it every day, and you still see like 400K underquoting is egregious.
Look, that property was in Alexandria. We went and visited with Chris, and Chris was like so excited about it. I looked at the price. I looked at him like we barely did like a turnaround. I'm like, it's gonna go up.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's not even a point to look at the strata reports.
You told me about that.
It's gonna go for like at minima. I thought 1.2.
Yeah, I think in the office you called 1.4 before it went for 1.4.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. It was pretty mind blowing.
Oh,
one thing with that is, for our listeners, for your listeners, Emily.
Our listeners. I'm sharing
the listeners today. Don't freak out, because it's very easy if you're not used to the world of inspections, if you're not used to the world of underquoting. There's a good chance you're going to punch in 900. Someone's going to tell you 1.2. You're going to freak out. You're going to start going cap in hand to everyone. You're going to call up your broker, punching it up. You're going to potentially run the risk of overstretching yourself. It was probably going to be 1.2 anyway, with or without the first home buyer's grant. Or maybe it was going to be 1.15. Maybe it's pushed up a little bit.
But
don't
it's
stress.
outside your budget.
It was going to be outside your budget with or without this. So reevaluate expectations.
And I think on those words of wisdom, that's all we've got time for today. Join us next week for another episode of the First Property Buyer Show. Bye for now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.